Yeah, exactly. So I kind of have always had this quite cynical notion of the human race anyway. Like, we're no better than bacteria or something in some respects, the way we just sort of go into an area and take it over and drain it of everything that could possibly be any good and then move on. Cynical as it sounds, that is what happens. That is what we do, so...
That is not our fault, though.
Is it the fault of a bacteria?
No.
No.
No, but I don't even mean it like that. What I mean is like our the drive of survival that every living thing has on the planet. It can always encounter a situation whereby it actually it is forced to evolve in a certain direction, whereby it has to come out of whatever niche it was occupying and into other niches just to survive. And the way we did it is sort of the ever expanding pattern whereby, that if we run out of stuff in a place, we'll move on to the next place. It's the nomadic kind of principle. And we are highly adaptable to new environments, and therefore we can exploit new environments. And, we have our ways to do this. But obviously this then runs out when you have populated the entire planet with 7 billion people, because there's nowhere left to move.
There are, actually. The planet's not overcrowded just yet.
Well,
7 billion does seem like a lot of people, but technically, no, the planet is not covered yet.
I think you're still onto a losing philosophy. You're still onto a losing mechanism, really. It eventually will cave in. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah.
If we continue along the same pattern, which is why we have to, as, mammals, if you like, instinctively develop a harmonious relationship with our environment. Yeah?
I think that is the key. We haven't got a harmonious relationship with our environment at this present moment in time.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
And whether we can achieve that, I don't know. But I think the only way of achieving it is through culture, because culture is the system that controls us.
Yeah.
And if culture does not change to adapt to the fact that we are now living in a much, from its perspective, smaller environment, and it's shrinking all the time from its perspective. Of course, it's not actually shrinking, but just the number of people is going up. But so, if it can't adapt to that change in the dynamic, then it's not going to last. And if it doesn't last, we won't last, because we're dependent on it. And so that is why we're making these recordings.
Yeah, essentially.
Acknowledging the fact that culture is a collective brain, and we're just pumping information into it. Hello, culture, wake up now, please.
Yeah, but so if you say that culture is an actual living thing, one brain, then basically culture needs to know thyself.
Yeah.
As a whole, and that's the whole point of doing this, yeah. Well, it is, anyway.
And of course, we can know ourselves, and that might help, but it might not help, because obviously
it needs to be a much higher percentage of the population of the culture knowing thyself in order for it to actually make any difference, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think though that's probably the wrong way to go about it, because what I tend to observe with spiritual people is that they isolate themselves from culture and devoid themselves from culture, because culture has led us in the wrong direction, and they can see it because they're knowing themselves.
Yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I feel.
And I've been through this process, and on the other side of it was my realisation that actually, in order to have effective change, we can't just look away from culture and pretend it doesn't exist, because
I don't think I'm doing that, though.
No, I'm not saying you are, but this is my realisation. I was rejecting culture. I was tuning into my own nature, and this is valid, but in the process of rejecting culture, I was basically turning my back on it. But at the end of the day, it's not going to disappear just because I'm not looking at it. So therefore, I am now creating to put into it. And that's what's changed in my way of thinking upon that realisation.
Yeah.
And so it's not just enough to know, or it might be enough. It's not enough for people to know themselves, but they need to then realise that they are part of this process. It's a genetic and mental process that we're all engaged in, and the genetics really, it's all nailed, basically, all that shit's been going on for billions of years. but this mental aspect is relatively new. We're still on our infancy.
Very much so, I think.
The strategy of survival via mind is still in its infancy.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen what will happen.